Hello, everyone. I did my final unit on solving multi-step word problems. My students are in fourth grade. I have 22 students in my classroom, 2 of which have IEPs and receive small group support. And most of my students have mastered addition and subtraction. We've been working on multiplication as a class, and most of my students are comfortable multiplying up to 2-digit by 2-digit numbers. And I do have a couple high achieving students who are able to do division as well. The state standard I decided to focus on is this one. It's a huge standard. I'm not going to be able to cover it all in one unit, so I bolded the sections that we're focusing on. Solving multi-step word problems posed with whole numbers and having whole number answers, so there shouldn't be any remainders or fractions in answers. And also using a letter standing for an unknown quantity. So that's our variable. We've been working on variables for the past couple of weeks now. So students should be comfortable putting variables into their equations. All right, I have a few different objectives that we're going to be covering. Objective 1 is to solve multi-step word problems with 75% accuracy. Their final quiz will have 4 questions, so they'll be expected to get at least 3 correct. If they do not, I do have a setup for how I will help support the students who did not achieve this goal. Objective 2 is students will be able to create one solvable multi-step word problem. I'm going to get into how they do that a little bit later in this presentation. Objective 3, students will be able to create 3 equations from word problems using a variable. So being able to see the equation or the word problem and create the equation. And then students will be able to use a variable to represent an unknown number 90% of the time. So this isn't just on the test, this last one, that one is all the time. They should all be comfortable using a variable at this point. All right, I chose gold standard project-based learning because this is the one that I am most excited about. I love it. I love projects and my kiddos love it too. So why not do it? Just to touch on a couple of the different phases. So students are be able to create their own multi-step word problems that can be answered by gathering data from the class. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as I delve into the days. Students will create their poll for a class that's using Google Forms and then use that data to formulate their multi-step question that can be answered by their peers. Authenticity, students are using a peer poll, so answers are true to our classroom. It's not random data gathered from some other part of the country. It's questions that are about our class and are answered about our class. And student voice and choice, students are able to choose their own questions. They're also able to choose their own operations that they feel comfortable with when creating their word problems. Students will fill out a reflection sheet on their learning during the project. So I can know what did I do well, and then what can I do better next year? Critique and revision. I'm gonna have multiple conferences with my students, making sure that they are up to where they're supposed to be, right? We don't want them to start on a wrong note and then by the end we realize that they have not been doing what they're supposed to be doing the whole time. So making sure we have those check-ins. And then students will ask their questions to their peers. And my class next year will answer their questions before doing the project. So final multi-step word problems. Next year, because I haven't done this before, I can't do it this year, but next year I'll use the questions that they formulate to introduce this unit. Some technology I'm using. So I have Kahoot. This is what we're doing day 1. Kiddos love Kahoot. Instead of just giving paper reviews, I like to do Kahoot reviews because it's highly motivating for my students. Google Forms, when students need to collect data for their polls. Google Forms does a great job of organizing that data in an easy to read format. So students will be using that. And Seesaw is where they will be doing their final project. I love it because not only can they type on it, they can insert screenshots of manipulatives, they can draw on it, they can record their voices and explanations, and they can comment on other peers' posts. Technology use, speech to text, I'm going to allow a few of my struggling ELA students to use. They become a little bit overwhelmed when trying to write. I want them to be excited and focus on this math and have fun. So those few students will be allowed the speech to text feature. online manipulatives. This is for my math program at school. It is so wonderful. There's a variety of manipulatives to choose from. So they're going to pick the one that works best for them. And they all have a bunch of wonderful features. I'm going to explain more about the one I chose to use a little bit later. And Google Docs, I will screenshot the multi-step questions at the end to create my final quizzes and put them on Google Docs and print. Daily activities, about a 6-day unit, depending on how it goes. You know, sometimes we expect things to be shorter than they actually are, and they end up taking a while. So about 6 days. Day one, we're all about activating background knowledge with the Kahoot. So children are in tables and they'll work together to answer these questions. And then they will, as they're talking, I'm going to be walking around with the checklist of students, seeing who is leading this discussion, who's super comfortable with multi-step word problems, who is participating and doing okay, and who is just listening and learning. That way, when I group, I wouldn't put two listeners and learners together. I'll put someone who feels a little bit more confident with the listener and learner. That way, that we have a team that can work together and hopefully independent, or as a pair, independently accomplish their tasks. All right, this is a handout that I'm going to give right after the Kahoot. It's just a brief overview of what the students can expect to be doing throughout the next couple 5 to 6 days. And I have this I can statement right on top, this, so the students know this is what I'm expecting you to be able to do at the end of this unit. So they can really focus in on that one key skill, creating and solving multi-step word problems. All right, day 2, student voice and choice. So they're creating a word problem. So they're going to come up with a question to ask their peers. It should be open-ended, but one word answer. So we don't want yeses and nos. We want something like, what's your favorite color? Blue, yellow, green. That's going to make it a lot easier to formulate these questions. Students will have a quick check-in with me to make sure that their question's going to work for this, so they don't get to the multi-step part and it falls through. So they're coming up with their question. We will have a class brainstorm. My kids love that, just to get ideas flowing. Day 3, they're making their Google form, and then they're polling the class to get their answers. So this is the authenticity piece. Our questions are going to be all about our classroom, real life questions that then helps them learn about their peers as well, which is awesome. Day 4, it's going to be a challenging problem. Creating their own multi-step word problems is something the students have not done before. They're using Seesaw and online manipulatives in this. So they're going to receive a word problem checklist and a Seesaw checklist. So these I'm going to show you in a second, but they're taking their data from their word problem and creating that taking their data from the Google form poll and creating their multi-step word problem. They have to have an equation on their Seesaw to show, and a couple other things. I'm going to show you a student example, so you'll see all those expectations. Again, I'm going to check this before they move on to make sure that we're on the right track. They're also going to record a short video or do a voiceover explaining their thinking, which is one thing I love about Seesaw. Okay, so student handout 1, this is their word problem checklist. These are the expectations of their word problems. So uses data from Google Form. Your question can't be, what's your favorite color? And then your multi-step word problem be talking about how many aunts and uncles people have. It has to be related to the Google form. All the necessary information to solve has to be in that word problem. It can't be go back and refer to the data to answer. They need all the information in there. Math vocabulary, add, subtract, total, sum, leftover. Whatever math vocabulary they choose to use. For my struggling students, they will receive a list of math vocabulary to choose from. And question clearly states what's expected to solve. So what is the person who's solving your problem? What are they trying to do? This is the Seesaw checklist. So word problems on the first slide. There's an equation with a variable to help solve the problem. That part would not be on the test. That would be expected of the students to do on their own. A model of how to solve the word problem that is using the Bridges online manipulatives. A recording that explains how to solve either voiceover or a face-to-face recording. And an answer includes units. We're all about units in the classroom. You can't just give me a number. You got to tell me what that number represents. And then I just have these little signs for teacher approval. student artifact. All right, I'm going to play this for you. My example, not a student's.
Of a seesaw that a student might create. This is a sample word problem. There are 22 students in 4th grade. 10 students like the color blue, 5 students like the color green, and 3 like yellow. The rest of the students like the color red. How many students like the color red? Here's an equation they could create: 22 minus start parentheses 10 plus 5 plus 3 m parentheses equals r. Then on the next slide, I will play an example explanation. In the background, we have our manipulative example. My equation is 22 minus parentheses 10 plus 5 plus 3 and parentheses equals r. R is my variable and it stands for red. So what I did is I used a number line.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. As you can see, the student would just be explaining how they use that manipulative to solve this problem. All right. Next, so Google Docs, this is going to be assessing the student knowledge. So I'm going to take the questions that the students have created and I'm going to put them into levels and then give the levels out to corresponding levels with my students. And then they'll be expected to solve those with a equation and a variable and then a final answer. They don't have to use manipulatives for this one, but they're welcome to if they would like. And then last, seesaw, critique and reflection. So if I have a student who did not do very well, or a couple, which is, it probably will happen, then what they can do is they can go back and view their peer seesaw for the questions that were on their test, see what their peers wanted them to do, how they were expected to solve. And then we can work one-on-one or a small group together, making sure that they really understand this skill, and further interventions will be available if need be. All right, that is the end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm so excited to start teaching this with my students, and feel free to steal this. Have a wonderful day, everyone.